Hi, this is Daniela, and welcome to Bestie Life, the podcast, where we help you stop burnout now. If you're tired of running on empty, juggling all the things, and wondering when your life is supposed to feel better, you're in the right place. This show is your go-to space for real talk and practical strategies to help you protect your energy, create balance, and actually enjoy the life you're working so hard for. You'll get a mix of solo episodes and honest conversations with guests. My goal is to help you feel less alone, more empowered, and way more in control of your time and energy and well-being. So let's get into it. Hey friends, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about burnout, but not the kind where you think of just being wiped out, running on fumes, and Googling, is it normal to cry in your car? But I want to talk about that early stage of burnout, the subtle stuff, the stuff we let slip by, those sneaky signals that show up way, way before the crash. Because burnout doesn't happen overnight. It builds quietly, slowly, and sometimes very convincingly, like we're doing a great job. But the good news is, if you spot it early, you can interrupt that pattern. And you don't need to take a sabbatical, have a massive career change, or a full breakdown to really make things better. So if you ever thought, I'm not burned out, I'm just busy, or things are fine, I just need to push through this busy season, then this episode is for you. So I want you to grab your favorite beverage, get something to write with, and let's dive in. So let's talk about, why is burnout so hard to catch early on? This is one of the biggest reasons that burnout can sneak up on high achievers, high performers, because at first it often looks a lot like dedication. You're still showing up, you're getting things done. You might even be praised for how reliable, responsive, or driven you are. But underneath that productivity, something starts shifting. Burnout isn't always just exhaustion. It can be a state where your nervous system never fully powers down. And early on, it doesn't feel like a massive stop sign. If anything, it tells you to do just a little bit more. And that's why we miss it. And so when our nervous system doesn't get that chance to really relax, to really reset at the end of each day, we're always humming, we're always running. And that's where then that burnout can start to happen. But over time, we don't notice it. It's almost like a slow drip versus a massive hole in the dam. That small drip is easy to ignore. It's easy to think it's not going to do anything big. So let's talk about those early warning signs that a lot of you might be ignoring. I know I've ignored them in the past. And by having that awareness, that's how we're going to get in and stop them before they progress. So the first red flag I want you to watch out for is always being on. And maybe you're not always at work, but you're always reachable at some point. Or your brain is always constantly thinking about what's next, that next project, that next conversation. Even during downtime, you're not really taking your time off. And so you might notice things like you're struggling to relax, even when you technically have the time to do so, or your mind jumps to work the second there's a quiet thought in your head, there's a quiet moment. Or you feel guilty resting unless everything is absolutely completely done. And this isn't a time management thing. This is a nervous system issue. Because like I said, your body has learned that being available equals being safe or being valuable. And so that early part of burnout can show up as being hyper responsible, not as a collapse. And so you're there, you're actually the person people are relying on all the time, but almost to an extreme. And so if this resonates, I just want you to notice it. I don't want you to feel guilty or beat yourself up about it or think you need to stop immediately. We're not fixing this yet, but awareness comes first. So I just want you to notice that part. Another early signal, your patience is shrinking. I know this was a big one for me. Your tolerance is way lower than it used to be. For me, I was snapping at my kids way more than I wanted to, than I needed to, than I should, over sometimes the tiniest little things. But those little things at that moment felt so much bigger. Small delays felt so irritating. And so being quicker to snap or shut down, you might just be telling yourself, oh, I'm just tired, or I'm just stressed, or I'm just in a bad mood. But what's really happening again is your system is overloaded. And when that burnout is building, your brain is shifting into protection mode. And so this irritability, it's actually a protective factor for you, but it's showing up as less patience, less flexibility, and more reactivity. You're starting to almost go into that fight or flight. And so your heightened reactive state is meant to be a protective measure, but as we're talking and we know, it's actually what's heading towards burnout. So if you're thinking, that's not like me, this isn't who I am, and I know I've said this before about myself, this wasn't who I wanted to show up as a mom, this wasn't who I knew I could be, these are your clues to realize, oh my gosh, I might be heading towards a burnout. Third red flag to watch out for is you're numbing instead of recovering. And this one is subtle, but so powerful, because early burnout doesn't always make you exhausted. Sometimes it just makes you disconnected. Maybe you scroll a little bit longer than you normally would. Maybe you snack without noticing even like what you're eating, how much you're eating, or you're watching shows you just don't even care about, but just to have some noise on, just to be sitting there kind of zoning out. And at that moment, you're not really relaxing, even though we might think we are. You're escaping. And that's kind of the difference of why it doesn't fill you back up. Why, after even days off, if you're not really relaxing and just escaping, you're not going to feel restored. And so to really look at that recovery piece of what's really going to restore you, because numbing is just going to help you survive in that moment. The tricky part is, though, here's another catch, numbing can feel productive because you're not doing nothing. But if you end your evenings feeling just as drained as you started them, again, I want you to start paying attention. What did you do during that time? And recognizing maybe that you're numbing versus recovering. And so having that awareness is going to be key. And the cost of ignoring a lot of these signs is kind of the hard part that people don't always want to hear but need to. This kind of burnout isn't going to go away on its own. It either gets addressed early or it forces you to take that hard pause later on. And later, that's when it hits that bigger state of an emotional shutdown, having health issues, maybe resenting the job or people you used to enjoy being around, or even that larger, I just can't do this anymore type of moment. And so interrupting burnout early isn't weakness, it's self-respect. It's smart. It's leadership for yourself in your own life. And so let's talk about how to start interrupting those small patterns that you started to be aware of and started to notice, and then how we're going to start recovering. So one of the first steps to interrupt that early sign of burnout is to name the pattern. Okay, so you're not going to fix burnout by pushing harder or being more disciplined or putting more rules in place, but to just start by naming what's actually happening. And I want you to try this simple sentence, so simple, and just say, lately I've noticed that I blank. So for me, back to my example, that situation, lately I've noticed that I've been snapping at my kids over the smallest things. That's where I was at that moment 20 years ago when I was going through my own burnout. I noticed I couldn't keep carrying the weight of everything all by myself. And it's not about having any type of judgment, no drama. Maybe I've noticed I'm always thinking about work. I've noticed I don't feel rested even after a weekend or a week off. I've noticed I'm more irritable than usual. And by filling in this sentence and creating that clarity is going to give you a choice now of what do you do with that information versus when we didn't have that awareness, when we weren't acknowledging it, we were in that denial state. That's when we were numbing, and that's where that burnout was coming from. So all we're doing right now, no judgment, no shame, is just having some clarity on what's going on, so that now we're opening up some choices, okay? And the next part then is how we're gonna address it, what we're gonna do with that. And again, this is where sometimes with great intentions, we might not make the best choice. Because a lot of times we think preventing burnout just means we need a super long vacation or a perfect routine or a massive life change. But that's not necessarily what's going to help, because a lot of times that long vacation, we're still going to come back to the same pattern at that time. trying to find a perfect routine or a massive life change, that can be just as, if not more stressful than what you're dealing with. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at small, consistent interruptions in those patterns. And that's really what this early burnout is going to respond better to. So those micro moments that I like to talk about, very practical, very small but intentional things, like maybe a 10-minute walk during your lunch break, taking some space between when you get home from work before you dive into making dinner or hanging out with your family, giving yourself some protected time for you. Having boundaries around your availability. I love having boundaries because they are such a blessing for you and everybody else around you. Maybe to take one decision you stop revisiting over and over again, or just even having one evening a week that's truly yours. Like I said, we're not trying to fix your whole life, but you're taking some small intentional space and giving your nervous system a new message, which is it's safe to slow down. It's safe to pause. It's safe to be me. And during that time, you can do some mindfulness. You can do some intentional breathing. You can do some strategies that I can talk about in a different episode. And I've talked about some before, as far as when it comes to really doing that nervous system resetting and recharging. And then the last part is acting before you feel like it. And this is key, because if you wait until you feel rested, motivated, or calm to start these practices, you're going to wait forever. So burnout recovery starts with action, not with having the energy, okay? Actually taking the action is going to start giving you the energy. So I want you to choose one small change and commit to it for the next week. So go back to that list that I gave. And if you want some other different examples, please reach out to me, send me a message or an email, and we can go through what some different choices can look like to help to start protecting your nervous system, letting it know it's safe to shut down. But like I said, taking a 10-minute walk during your lunch break, taking some space when you're transitioning between work and home, setting boundaries around your availability. Okay, this is just a small list, but re-listen to that again, because choosing that one small change just for 1 week, the momentum is going to start building after you take each action. And as that momentum builds, that's going to be the catalyst to creating that long-lasting change. So here's what I want you to remember. Burnout does not mean you're broken. It usually means you've been strong for too long without enough support. And spotting burnout early, unfortunately, is a skill that nobody's taught us. It's not taught in schools. We don't always talk about it in our families. But just like any skill, it gets easier with practice. The more we kind of build it into our routines, normalize talking about it, creating that awareness is what's going to make it feel simple, what's going to make it just part of your day to day. So I want you to ask yourself, what's one early sign that I've been brushing off? And then what's one small way I can interrupt that this week? And so I would love for you to let me know what's working for you at this time, what maybe you need a little bit of extra help and support with, if you have any questions. And if this episode hit home, please share it with someone who's been carrying a lot quietly. As well as if you're ready to go deeper, this is exactly the kind of work I help you with in our one-to-one Exhausted to Empowered Formula coaching program. Because remember, burnout doesn't need a dramatic exit. It just needs intentional interruption. So thank you so much for being here today, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you got something out of this episode that really made you feel seen, supported, or just a little bit more grounded. If you have any questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. And if you're up for it, please leave me a 5-star review. That will help more people find the show and join this community. I'll leave you with 2 of my favorite quotes. Alone we may be strong, but together we're stronger. And when we support each other, incredible things happen. So let's keep showing up for ourselves and each other, and maybe even have some fun while we're at it. I'll talk to you soon.